recorded live from the secret underground lair of Crimson Cowl Comics and Collectibles. This is the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast.
The following issues may contain spoilers. In Golganuza, even the silence could wound. I'm Anthony.
I'm David.
I'm Kirby.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Jim.
Welcome to issue number 278 of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast. Every time we record, we're here to talk about comic books. On this week's show, we're going to talk about issue 9 of Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. That is part of our club discussion selection. Then we're going to jump over to the weekly reviews. That's where we go back and forth and we talk about the books that we've been reading. Whether they're new, whether they're old, we're going to talk about them there. Then we're going to jump over to the news segment and we're going to cover our previews preview, part 1 of 2. This episode will cover the Marvel and DC Comics previews catalogs for October 2023 for products coming out in December and beyond. And on our next episode, we'll jump into the giant independent merchandise collectible catalog. So that is going to be the lineup for the show. We are going to kick it off with the club discussion as we're on to issue number 9 here of Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. What Maceo left for Mezzi turns to terror as he doubts if he ever knew her in the first place, and he even begins to fear the woman he once loved. Women too. The chasm between them grows quite literally as Golganuza's foundation crumbles and bubbles with the strange poison gas and makes their communication even more alien as they're presented with a tragic choice that should hurt more than it does. This comic is done by Jason Aaron, Leila De Duca, Tamara Bonvillain, plus and World Design. So yes, issue 9, a quick little kind of recap overview. Over the last couple issues, we've seen this mystery mist, if you will, that started to pollute Golganuza, their oasis, their safe place, their paradise. And we see a lot of the repercussions definitely in this issue as the mist continues to spread. There are people that are leaving the community. There are people, whether they choose to leave or whether they get attacked and murdered, and there's a possible monster. There's a debate whether it's a mist or a monster. There's a lot of discussion of that. And then this is a real heavy issue for the relationship of Mace and Mezzi on their own trust. They still have the loyalty to each other, wearing gas masks throughout most of the issue as they each kind of go on separate journeys to try and solve this problem, hunting down the monster and trying to get the mist to exit their community. But then there's a lot of trust issues when it comes to the relationship and how they feel about one another. And then we get a little tease on whether or not some of that is fueled by just the overall emotions that they have, or maybe it's part of the infection of what's happening with this mist. So that is an overall overview of what's happened in issue number 9. We will jump into this. Let's start over with Jim here. Your thoughts on Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, issue number 9.
This was, it's not a good issue because there's nothing really good happening in it, but it was a very interesting issue. I would say there was a couple of things that I really liked. I particularly liked their bedroom, the scenes of what their bedroom looks like in this post-apocalyptic fantasy, cobbled together world that they have. They have got this like really posh, modern looking bedroom, which is just kind of like out of place. Like neo-Western modern looking bedroom. And then near the end, when we find the one girl who becomes victim to the roses. I really like that scene. But again, nothing good is happening. Believe it or not, Mace and Mezzie's good days were when they were in the wasteland, and now that they seem to have had a world that they found that was paradise, now they have trouble and they can't go back to the life they built in the good old days. So it's kind of heartbreaking that way. But the mystery is still increasing, and while you think there might be on the right track, it doesn't. You also kind of feel like they're still missing something, and you need to find out what it is yet.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump over to Katie. Thoughts on issue number 9?
Sure. So there was really one page in particular that has stuck in my mind, like since I read this the first time. And it's when they're talking about they were letting one of the infected citizens in the library to try and lead them to a monster. And they talk about how they thought they could track him, and the monster was this person like eating the last books on Earth, they believe, and then they basically beat him to death, which is really messed up. That's not the part that grabbed me. What grabbed me is, if this truly were the end of the world and I had to go, if I had to get taken out by some kind of mutant, I'd be okay with dying on the last library on Earth. And more than that, that would be a way that I'd be okay and satisfied contributing to the human race. So in this Golganuza, we see different ways that people are trying to further the community, and it would be meaningful to me to like, I'm going to curate the library. Not only will I safeguard the last books on Earth, I will write more so that the stories do not die with us, and that the continuity of human art and history and expression is going to keep going. Maybe these people from the wasteland, they didn't learn how to read, so we'll keep an oral history, or we'll teach people how to read, because education is the key, more than just the life of scavenging for rats to try and survive. And I think part of what makes us human is our ability to communicate, to tell stories, to share history, to pass on mythology, and that's really important. So that would be where I would hang out in the wasteland. That's how I would contribute. And I don't know, it just felt very poignant to me, where I'm like, yeah, you know what? I could do that. And I don't really want to get attacked by like some kind of mutant gas monster, but if I go out that way, that would be a meaningful conclusion to a life well lived. So that would be my place in Golganuza. The club, specifically Jim, rightfully predicted the twist at the end of this book. So I was like, ha, see, we got it. But I've talked otherwise about my feelings about this arc, and I thought this was a pretty emotional arc, and they did an interesting way of illustrating that through the art, like making Mace and Mezzie very small and a wide chasm between them. Yeah, this was a pretty heavy book, but that's the page I'm talking about. That's what I thought about. That's what reached me, and yeah, I'd be okay being the last librarian on Earth. Anyway, that's my review.
Yeah, what I really like
Katie?
about this. Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just had a question for Katie. Would you have even left the pool of books from the
Nope.
beginning?
Nope. No, I wouldn't have. We could have stopped all of this from happening. I would probably. It reminds me of that Twilight Zone episode where the guy has all these books and he wants to read them and he doesn't have time, and then there's a nuclear attack, and then he's like, okay, finally I have time to read my books, and then he picks up his glasses and his glasses are shattered in
They're
half, and of
broken,
course
yeah.
he can't read. But no, I would have stayed in the pool of books. If I get however many years on this earth surviving upon candy bars and a pool of books, we'll take it and make the best of it that we can. So.
Yeah, sounds pretty good to me.
Mm-hmm.
This issue in particular, I think, is a good example of the horror that's being brought in through not only the mist / the monster, and it was interesting to see just how some of these people were taken down as he kind of just cut to some of these people, and and seeing the aftermath. And there's a lot of funerals that are happening in this issue, and the fact that they just kind of keep going back to it. So it's kind of like a standalone horror study. I thought it was a very awesome issue, and some freaky moments there dealing with some of the infected and behind the bars and the cages, and just seeing all of what's happening to everybody individually and how they're reacting to all this, I think is was excellent. I really enjoyed the issue on that front. I too double down and talk about really liking how that's portrayed, about just seeing while they're sharing the same bed, but how distant they are in that bed. And even though this is a book about crazy rooms and pillow forts and all this kind of stuff, I still assume this is just their normal size bed, but drawn in a way to kind of show just how distant they are. But so it is believable though that they do have that extra large bed in this kind of crazy oasis. But yeah, it was I just love that imagery. And then towards the end of it, without giving anything away with that last reveal, even though we do talk spoilers and such, but the imagery that's when Mace and Mezzy are kind of brought face to face again, was a really awesome turn page moment reveal of seeing, they get to see each other's faces again. And you start off the issue of them getting intimate, and they have all just put gas masks on their face, and they're talking about how they miss actually seeing each other, but not wanting to risk what's happening. But during the events of this issue, get to a comfortable point where they're like, hey, we could take these masks off now. But that reveal was quite awesome. So I think this is a good almost standalone issue. Like, if you didn't know much about this world, I think it did a good job of just kind of jumping right into it. And like I said, just from a horror aspect, I really dug this issue. So this was a strong one for me. Any other thoughts from Katie and Jim?
I'm excited to see how they start wrapping this up in the next few issues. It has been a good turnaround from like where it kind of lagged into a little bit of like smut for a while. So it's doing a good horror turn on that direction. So
Yeah, seconded.
All right. So yeah, that will do it then for issue number 9 of Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. As a little preview for what we all talk about here under the club discussion, upcoming episodes of this podcast, we will talk about Alligator Loki, which is a one-shot from Marvel. Then we have issue number 2 of Marvel Unleashed, of a 4-issue miniseries. Then we have another one-shot for It's Jeff, the Jeffers. Our little Jeff the Land Shark character is getting another batch of the Marvel Unlimited comics being available for print. And then we have a one-shot of My Little Pony, Black, White, and Blue, which I got a notification for. That's coming out very shortly. Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, number 10. More one-shots with Howard the Duck, number 1 in November. And 'Twas the Might Before Christmas from DC Comics. So there's a lot of fun, mostly one-shot stuff coming up in our club discussion. Later in the episode, we're going to do the previews for Marvel and DC, and that's where we kind of decide on, what could be future club discussion picks based on everybody's interest. So that is a little tease for what's to come. And yeah, that is going to do it then for that segment. Let's move over to the weekly reviews. First up for the weekly reviews, I am talking about something that was a recommendation from Troy Dungara. He talked about a comic by Keith Johnson, Q Monk 1 on Instagram. It's the letter Q, Monk, and the number 1. Cardboard Samurai. I thought this was it's an awesome name just in general. So right there, I was intrigued. So Cardboard Samurai, he has a little write-up. Keith Johnson has a little write-up in the beginning here. Get my lighting here. A paper airplane is something to me that represents a simple form of fun. This is a large part of the reasoning behind a samurai whose armor is made of cardboard. As a kid, I remember making everything from cardboard, from a castle to goalie equipment. for road hockey, so it seemed appropriate to create a character who worked on these very same principles. Cardboard Samurai is a skateboarder who is always looking for a good time that hopefully leads him to a great meal. He is well trained in martial arts, and while he doesn't look for trouble, if ever faced with what he considers as an injustice, he sees it as his obligation to help out however he can. Art and story is done by Keith Johnson. What attracted me to this beyond the title was I got two little additions because I have a recent one called Cardboard Samurai versus Gumwad, where he simply is walking and steps on a wad of gum, and when he steps on the wad of gum, the gum seems to be sentient. And I won't give away too much here. I'm just going to show a couple examples for our video audience here, just to kind of see the style of this very mini comic. But as the gumwad is getting a little angered at what happened, kind of turns into a monster. So that is your setup. You do get a tease of that on the back. So that's where I'll leave it as far as that. But what intrigued me was the production, especially this small one here. That these are all handcrafted. The binding of it, just on the trim, there's all these like little like cutout lightning bolts out of colored pink paper, and like you see a little of that on the inside as well. Here's a better example of that. So just the production level of this, the creativity was something that I was very much attracted to. This is a very quick, beautiful story with just these little mini pinups for page by page, telling the story of Cardboard Samurai versus Gumwad. And yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Also attached was the a slightly bigger comic, still half the size of a normal one. But this one has a bigger story. We're dealing with black and white artwork in this one. And this one tells the story of Cardboard Samurai, talking again about that paper plane and shooting it off to the distance, because basically this paper plane is going to lead him to this nearby food truck. And that is ultimately the idea of the story, is that wherever this airplane goes, Cardboard Samurai will just follow that airplane, and that will lead him to a good meal, as mentioned in the synopsis. He comes across a character early on in the story who's this kind of tall cat person named Doodat the cat. So Doodat the cat is our other character that joins Cardboard Samurai. And the setup for this story here, the whole idea of this adventure, like you said, he's not out there looking for trouble. He's not ready to bash in skulls but when he comes across an injustice, that is when he is ready to power up. Here's a good action shot there of Cardboard Samurai getting ready to go into action, because what he finds out is that this airplane is heading in a certain direction of a bridge, and under that bridge, as most would expect, would be a troll. So our main character monster battle in this issue is Cardboard Samurai versus this troll. I'll show, this one's a little longer one here, but I'll show if there's some other action I can show off here. But yeah, it's just a really fun comic and just real quirky, and the black and white I think suits it very well, even though we do have color in the small mini version. Black and white I think is just as satisfying, and yeah, super fun. In the back there's just a whole bunch of sketches of Cardboard Samurai and just seeing all of these different action poses and stuff like that. It doesn't so much look like it's a concept art. It looks like it's all basically finished design, but just kind of just showing off all of the different poses and action that this skateboard / Cardboard Samurai gets into. Yeah, this was just an awesome thing that I was glad that Troy had mentioned it. And like I said, just the craftsmanship that went into the little zine and the idea of a Cardboard Samurai was hilarious enough to me. So that is yeah, that is that. So if you want to check out Cardboard Samurai, you can follow Keith Johnson on Instagram, the letter Q Monk 1, Q Monk 1, the number 1 on there. And you can message him on how you can get your very own copies of Cardboard Samurai. And I think Kirby, you got your own copies, is that correct?
Yeah, mine came in the mail today, and I didn't know you were reviewing them. Otherwise, I would have quickly read them before the show. But yeah, they look like a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to checking them out.
Cool. All right, now we're gonna jump over to David, and a couple weeks ago on the show, I forget if it was the last episode or 2 weeks from our timeline, you talked about a an early release comic that you had, but now you're going to be revisiting that. What you talking about here?
Yeah, well, it's I'm still fortunately, and seems to be more so now, getting advanced copies in PDF format of upcoming comics. And so one of the ones that I took a look at, I was pretty excited for. I knew I was getting it anyways in physical copy, but I thought I'd kind of talk about it a little bit ahead of time, and that was Transformers #1 by Daniel Warren Johnson. But now that I have, the actual copy in hand, I thought it would be a great opportunity to revisit it when I can actually do a little show and tell with it as well, because it was not for being shared before. I didn't want to show any images from it or anything else. And aside from Anthony, was anybody else reading this? I know I thought there might have been some interest just on the creator alone. Not that everybody here is necessarily interested in reading Transformers comics. But I think that it was very interesting. I'm biased because I am a big Transformers fan, but I felt that this first issue was something that somebody not familiar with the franchise could have jumped into, and would have had questions, but questions that anybody even like me would have had. Like, yeah, there was some familiar things going on that I've seen kind of other versions of, but at the same time you're going, okay, what is he going to do with these characters? What is he going to do with the story? Some of the characters are introduced a little bit more differently than they had been previously, but we do see some familiar faces, both Cybertronian and human. Of course, you got Optimus Prime, who we've got on the cover here. There was a lot of artwork released as they were building up to this coming up, so you kind of got to see some of the characters, and no big surprises on who they were. A lot of fan favorites, but it's the artwork that you expect to see from Daniel Warren Johnson. The characters, like the human characters, look different than they've been portrayed before, but they definitely look like his characters. So essentially what we have is we have the Autobots and the Decepticons coming to Earth in a way that they've done before. The original Generation 1, G1 continuity, they crash on Earth, and then eventually they're awoken, and that's something that happens in this book. You also have the Witwickies, Spike and Sparkplug, and I'm trying to remember. Sparkplug, I think somebody calls him Sparky, but I don't think anybody actually says the full Sparkplug name. But Spike is called Spike, and Carly, which fans will recognize as being, depending on the version, his girlfriend, later wife, of Spike. She is also in this. So those are the human characters that we're introduced to, but you definitely get a feeling that there's going to be a different take on them than what we got in other stories. So it's a mix of familiar with what's the twist, what's going on here. And so you see, as they're crashed, they're all broken, and they wake up. This is also done a little bit differently than it's been done in the past. What causes them to awaken, and part of that is a familiar face right there for Transformers fans, but also because Image Comics has been putting out this other book that that surprisingly introduced this version of the Transformers by that character. Anthony, help me out here. What's the name of that book? I can't. It's
Void Rivals.
Yes. Um, Funny enough, I've got access to some free copies of those as well, but I haven't read them yet. But you got Skyfire, and I got to look back here because I think they were calling him Skyfire in this version. It's a character that's been known as Jetfire, Skyfire, depending on the continuity. So he's in there. First introduced in Void Rivals #1. At this version, anyways, it's a very old comic, but they're woken up. You get into a lot of action. So it's essentially what you're getting in this story is the glimpses of the start of this story that's going to be taking place, mixed with some great Autobot Decepticon battle action going on in what you come to expect from Daniel Warren Johnson's art and storytelling. So interestingly enough, not all of the characters that you expected to see right from the get-go are brought back and brought into this. And I don't know what's going on with that, if it's just so that he has a chance to focus on some of the other characters that well, I mean, they're not characters that don't get focused on normally anyways, but maybe so that there's a little bit more focus on them versus a couple of the others that are very popular characters and get probably overused these days. So, but I thought it was great. It's action packed. It's not disappointing for fans of the franchise. I think it would be an interesting way to jump into it if you are new to it, if you haven't checked this out before. I really have a feeling that there's going to be a good story here going on, even on the side with some of the human characters, so that people can relate to that a little bit more. So, Anthony, what was your thoughts on it?
So yeah, going into this one, I haven't read too many Transformers comics. I have a couple in my in my inventory, just out of just loving the toys and the cartoons back in the day. But it was never like a franchise that kind of grew up with me. I kind of got revitalized with the movies. I've seen all those, and I enjoy them to a certain extent. So Transformers for me is not a huge fandom as if it's like Star Wars or just Marvel in general or something. So going into this book, if it wasn't Daniel Warren Johnson, it probably wasn't gonna be on my list at all. But Daniel Warren Johnson is such a huge Transformers fan. In the backup of this, and I was curious if this was in the digital PDF edition, his back matter talking about his love of Transformers, was that included in your store reader copy?
I did not get that before.
So in the printed version, it is so great because if you don't know much about Daniel Warren Johnson, he gives you pretty much the rundown of how this is a dream project for him. He goes back to a very young age and talks about taking his original Optimus Prime toy on the school bus and how like they hit a bump or a turn and that the hands came out of the action figure and went to the back of the bus, and in the shuffle of going through the getting to school and stuff, he didn't have time to like try to find these toy Optimus Prime hands. And but yeah, like talking about just like how storytelling and imagination and everything is just all rooted with Transformers, and knowing that he is the writer and artist alongside Mike Spicer with the colors, who he often works with, that he gets to headline a Transformers book is just a huge dream come true for him. So that just fueled my excitement even more. I do like the details on the human characters, just because, like you said, they are drawn very much like, yep, those are Daniel Warren Johnson characters. You look at Daniel Warren Johnson's art, and you don't necessarily think like, oh, he would be perfect for Transformers. It's just like his art doesn't translate, I think, to that. Going into a book like this, you look at this, he's obviously drawing Transformers. They don't necessarily, that he wants to do justice by them and draw them as, recognizable as he can. But, I like that it feels like it's a blend, like it's almost a Transformers meets Daniel Warren Johnson in a brand new crossover.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. When I first heard that he was doing this, I was kind of like, how is that going to look? Being accustomed to what his art style is, and whereas Transformers is very, it's a lot of machinery, technical vehicles, spaceships, futuristic things, and so really just trying to think how is his art style going to translate to this. But when I look at these characters, the Autobots, the Decepticons, they very much look like you would expect them to, if anybody, that you didn't know of was doing a Transformers book. And yet you still get Daniel Warren Johnson's style in there. You still see that it comes through. So it actually does very well. And then his backgrounds and his human characters and everything, you really pick up on his style.
And then the focus in on those action points, the other big fandom of Daniel is that he loves pro wrestling. And I was just filled with joy when I see Optimus Prime doing a clothesline. He's doing a suplex, and he recently did I think it was a suplex cover. He did a sketch cover. He's at New York Comic Con at the time of this recording. So he did that on one of his recent drawing shows, and you can see some of that on there showing it off. And so having him instill pro wrestling moves and stuff into his action, like that just got me extra giddy, because I could just see him just like he's having the time of his life. He's done a lot of awesome stuff in a very short amount of time in comic books, and it just seems like it all leads to like not comic book world would be at a huge loss if he was going to retire after this. But like this could be one of those things being like, I've done it all in this book, and that's all just by one issue. So as long as Daniel Warren Johnson is writing and drawing Transformers, I'm gonna keep picking up. That's my review of this.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious and excited to see where this goes. And I'm going to continue to read it because of that as well. Because like I said, I mean, there is really a mix of like this old stuff that's been done versus this new twist to it. So I'm really curious, like, okay, what is he going to do? Where is this going to go? One issue just isn't enough for that. I don't think 2 issues is going to be enough. I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit before we really get a good, solid feel for where this journey is going to take us.
Excellent. So yeah, Transformers #1. Check it out. I did buy a blank sketch cover variant because I have a very fun idea that I want to try to do on there. So we'll see if that turns out or not. We're gonna jump over to Kirby. What you got for us?
Yeah, I didn't get my newest box in yet of comics, but I'm pretty sure I have ordered one of the Transformers sketch covers too. I got a little teaser. I don't know if it was in Void Rivals or something else that I had, but I did get a little teaser to the first issue, and it looked good. So
Cool.
I'm not big on Transformers, but Chilling Adventures presents Strange Science #1 one shot. Glasses on here. Danny Malloy is Jinx Holiday's best friend, and where one goes, the other is sure to follow, even if that means through hell and back and forth, through the depths of space and time. When Danny receives a mysterious message from former friend Dilton Doily, She's horrified to learn that Dilton's built a time machine and it's gone terribly wrong. And now the three of them have been transported to a warped version of Riverdale, where nothing seems quite right. It's up to Danny to bring them back to the present day and the hometown they know and love. And she might have to explain a thing or two to Jinx about what's going on, too. Strange Science explores Danny's personal history, time travel, and the importance of being to be true to yourself and what matters most to you. This is another fun, chilling adventure story. Danny gets this little message from Dilton, and all it really says is help. So apparently they had a science fair, and she made a time machine, and Dilton they kind of went at each other just because Dilton wants to always be the top scientist and doesn't like anybody else stepping on his coattails. So she did what she had to and let Dilton get the win at that time. But when she gets this message from Dilton, she's hooks up with Jinx and they take her time machine and don't really plan anything out. They just go for it and jump into the time-space continuum and end up in this weird version of Riverdale where it's kind of like you're stuck in a picture, but if they take an item and throw it and it kind of like stretches out and turns colors when it hits a certain edge of the picture realm. You see here Pops and Hot Dog walking on the street, and Pops' head's kind of like tilted to the side and pulled off, stretched out and stuff, and the houses are all tilted and weird. At first when they came in, I was thinking it was going to be a play on Dr. Seuss, but yeah, then you kind of figure out that they're actually in their hometown, and just everything's just kind of frozen and tilted and just warped out. But they eventually come across Dilton and another character that just happens to be hunting them down. And it's kind of like a weird twisted body, that newfound horror thing where the body parts are turned around and stuff, and they just all walk all weird and creepy looking. But yeah, you'll have to read the book to get deeper into finding out what that is. But Danny dealt with some transitions in her past, and it's basically a little bit of her past coming back to haunt her. And they do a fun little twist on the time travel, which I'm not big on, but they work their ways through here and they try and deal with the problems that come across their paths while they're trying to help Dilton out, and they do what they can to get back to a normal life and figure out what was going on. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, as the rest of them. Another great one shot from Archie Comics. This is done by Magdalene Visaggio, Butch Mappa, and Ellie Wright and Jack Morelli. So check it out.
Yeah, they've been knocking it out of the park on their Chilling Adventure Presents one shot. So yeah, those have been pretty sweet. All right, we are going to jump over to Katie. What you got for us?
All right, this week I'm going to do an overview of a series I read called The Savior Cafe in Another World. This is a manga series. There's 5 volumes in it, and it is complete. It is based on the novels by Kiyuka Izumi. The story in the manga is done by Umiya, and then the art is by Raiko Sakurada. So this is a pretty cute light romance book. The stakes aren't very high. I'd probably put it at PG-13, depending on your child. That might, be a little bit higher. Nothing really happens with the exception of the very last chapter. There's some descriptions that I don't think are dirty or anything, but just probably not appropriate for someone under 12. The story is about a woman named to Skina, who is a single 30-something office worker in our world who, really isn't interested in a relationship, and she's got her circle of friends, but basically her life is I go to work, I go home, I read my book, and I do it all again the next day, and she's pretty content with that. But one day, God shows up in her dreams and offers her the chance to become a savior in this magical world. And the previous saviors have all been like teenagers, and they have ideas of like big grand adventure, but it doesn't work out because like you're sending a 15-year-old to save an entire country. They might need a little more life experience. Sukina feels like she's too old for this, but God convinces her to go and do this, because he's like, basically like, what do you have to lose here? So she lists all these demands for God that she's like, okay, I'll be the savior if and if and if and if you do all these things for me. And God's like, you know what? Done. Okay, great. So she gets transferred to this world in the country of Othel, where she uses her magic to kind of lay low and open up a book cafe, which is a hybrid between a library and a coffee shop. And she lives in the apartment above it. And through her magic, she's able to get any book at all in the world. And there's no cost. Anytime a new book in the series comes out, it magically appears on her shelf. And she can use her powers to infuse her recipes with healing charms. And she starts studying to do something called barrier magic, which is like protective charms and shielding you from injury and psychic damage. Things are going all right until a handsome young captain named Zoey comes into her bookshop. Now, Zoey might be a big tough guy today, fighting the baddies, leading his knights, but he's actually a big softy bookworm nerd. And him and Sukina, of course, fall in love. And they, so book one is just kind of established characters. Book two, we find out there's another savior in Othel that is like, yeah, I kind of messed up. This savior is acting like a spoiled brat. She doesn't want to learn any magic. She's not trying to protect people, and she's using her power to get the castle staff and knights in trouble over just like smallest things. And she ends up overdoing it because she has basically a temper tantrum and lets her magic go and get way too far, and brings down some bad guys on Othel. That Sukina has to put up a new magic barrier to save the country and the townsfolk. And that's when she revealed to Will that she is the savior, but she wants to keep it quiet. And everyone, kind of goes back to normal because they're like, oh, there's a new savior, but they haven't figured out who she is. So, life just kind of moves on. And then we actually see God come and visit Sukina a couple times in the story. He starts having tea parties with her, and you know what? I could go for some tea with God. That would work for me. I'd enjoy that. And then what else? So, Sukina is, doing pretty good. She's making new friends. The knights are really happy to have her magic. A newcomer to the court is kind of walking the line between like being her friend and flirting with her. Meanwhile, she Il has proposed to her and she's accepted. They're engaged. They're going to get married. So there's some drama between that. Like, how does she like let him know that like, hey, like I'm dating this person, and Il ends up doing it for her, which causes a little bit of conflict. But of course the conflict gets resolved. They do go on some really cute dates. They go to this festival with like lanterns and magic flowers and make a wish, and it's super sweet, very fluffy. I will say, to me, the stakes felt kind of low, which I think is the point of this novel. To me, it was a good de-stressor. I was never in any doubt that like catastrophe would happen, or our characters would have something terrible occur to them or something. And then kind of I thought in the last two-ish books, 1.5 books, so like the second half of volume 4 and then 5, from a country that does not have a good relationship, Othel is trying to make friends with Sukina and is showing up at this bookshop, and they are very and they're still really skinny. So Sukina's like, where are you putting all this? And we can kind of see that they are a foreign agent, and that ends up causing some problems. They make a sacrifice to protect the people of Othel because they've come to really respect them, and their friendship with Sukina means a lot. The character's name is Bran. We find out Bran is an automaton. So they make a sacrifice, but Sukina uses her magic to bring Bran back. And that's the end of the book. She has another talk with God. And then book 5, it wraps up with Sukina and Ill's wedding at the church. Ill's father watched. She looks so beautiful in her dress. You know, she looks amazing. I'm so glad I could be here. Man, you're such a great friend. You've forgiven me. And everyone's very, very happy. And they lived happily ever after. And the end. This was really cute. There was a little afterward that was mostly text based. That was a little bit about their like honeymoon. I didn't find it offensive, but depending on the age of your child, like maybe you or their sensitivities, maybe you don't want to show them that part of the book. This was a super cute series. I do recommend it. Like I said, I found them very relaxing. They're pretty easy to read. They're not that complicated, and there's just the right amount of like cottagecore vibes and magic vibes. And you know, as somebody who grew up reading like hero's journey tales, you know, and wanting to go on this fabulous adventure as a teenager, and then you're an adult and you're like, oh crap, like that's not real, but there's a part of you that still wants to go on that adventure. This was a little bit fulfilling in that regard, that yeah, you can be a 30-something office worker and still have a grand adventure and get chosen by God for tea parties and world sages. I enjoyed it. It was published by Seven Seas Entertainment. I would read more by them. That's my review. I encourage you to check it out yourself and see what you think about The Savior's Book Cafe in Another World 1 through 5. And that's my review.
Cool. All right, jumping over to an illustrated book that I picked up called Ava and Zoey, A Poetic Tale of Sisterhood. Ava and Zoey is a refreshing and delightful story of two very different sisters who prove that living in harmony is possible despite their opposite personalities. The rhythmic structure combined with the heartwarming illustrations will make this book a family favorite. This is done by Sarah Rosenberger Blows and Chelsea Curran. So this is in my hands because I know the illustrator. Chelsea is somebody who I reached out and befriended 10 years ago, working on a personal project that her and I collaborated on. And over the years, I had gotten some fun commissions from her. And this was some news. She kind of took a huge social media break over the last year or two. It was one of those things, just kind of wondering, you know, like, oh, I hope everything's all right. And when she came back, she released a book. So this is the first illustrated book that she is working on here. So I ordered up a couple copies here and devoured it. So this is a very adorable book. It's a illustrated, kids book telling the story of these two sisters, from the birth of the young sister and kind of seeing their relationship and seeing how different they are when it comes to, keeping things neat and tidy, and then chaos on the other side for the younger sister. And it's each page is kind of really showing the difference. They're hanging out at a beach, so you see one sitting there reading with the dog, just enjoying a peaceful time, and once again chaos ensues, and the other one's just having a blast, kicking up the sand and stuff like that. So as you go through this book, you see a lot of those similar situations that they're put in, and how they deal with it in very different ways, but ultimately their bond of being sisters is what keeps them together. I'll show off this one yet because it's pretty fun, and I'll just do a little example of how this book is structured. Ava orders bland food with very little spice. She craves simple noodles or plain white rice. So we see her there, but she's looking a little angry. She's looking off to the next page, which is Zoey loves exotic meals, varied textures, lively flavors. She will try anything, new thrills are what she savors. And you just see her going to town there, and it's just the exact opposite of what's happening in the other page there. So that's a good example of what's happening here. This was just awesome. Just she teased this a while ago, knowing that something was in the works, and it was pretty cool that that she'd gotten these opportunities after being an artist and kind of wanted to just have that being her main job. I know Chelsea as a teacher, and she's a Canadian that was relocated to Sweden, and she did some teaching and stuff like that while also pursuing her art. And yeah, I was just extremely proud to see that this book not only was announced, but that it was ready to order, rather than saying, "Hey, I illustrated a book. It'll come out in 2 years." Like it felt good that like during this absence of her not being online, that the result of it is an actual physical book. So this book can be purchased, at least I know, through the publisher. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Eifrig Publishing. It's EIFRIG publishing.com. And yeah, so you can go there, and there it is in print. And yeah, so you can order this. It's available both in a paperback as well as a hardcover edition. I picked up one of each. And yeah, so super cool, super exciting. And I hope this leads to more things for both of the creators. And if you are interested, since I have Chelsea's information here for Chelsea's website, which links to her shop and portfolio and a way to contact her. So chelseacuran.com. That's Kuran. So Chelsea Curan. And yeah, so check them both out. I know the Sarah, the writer, has a photography business and stuff too. Checking out her Instagram. I'm less familiar with her work, but they both collaborated on this very beautiful, family-friendly kids book here. So there we go. That is Ava and Zoey, A Poetic Tale of Sisterhood. Cool, cool. All right, jump back over to actually, David, you have something, a blast from the past.
I do. I was going through. Sometimes I actually get a little overwhelmed on all the stuff, back issues and everything that I have, and I'm like, okay, I want to read something, and I'm like, where do I jump in? There's just so much that I have. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I've got a spinner rack in my bedroom upstairs that I've got a variety of stuff on that I threw on, that kind of like, I'm going to start reading some of this stuff. And one of the things that was on there is the earliest issue of X-Men that I own. That's a first printing and whatever. And you'd think that somebody as big of an X-Men fan as myself might have some even older than this one. But my first one is issue 43. And I've actually never read this copy. Now, some of the early stuff I've read in different formats, classic X-Men, essential X-Men, things like that, where I've read some of the older stories. But this actually being a physical copy, hold in your hand, try not to, let the cover fall off, type of book, is the earliest not reprinted, first printing, whatever version that I have. So I read that for the first time this morning. And this is a 1967 book. It follows what I think was that the first time Professor X ever died. Because there's been a few times where he faked his own death or whatever. So this issue actually follows the death of Professor X, and it opens with Magneto as he's watching the original characters, and I do have to be careful with this cover. He's kind of spying on them somehow at the funeral of Charles Xavier. One of the big things that's happening in this story is that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch had left the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. They joined the Avengers. Scarlet Witch was shot by a human, costing her powers, and Pietro, trying to help nurse her back to health, actually takes her to Magneto, and they rejoin in hopes that Magneto can somehow help heal her, which he promises to do. But little do they know that it was actually Magneto himself who used his powers to guide the bullet that hit Scarlet Witch, intentionally causing this problem, because he felt that they will come back to me, and that's all part of his grand scheme. One of the things when I was reading this issue is Magneto's building something. He's been like attacking ships and building some kind of device, and it just kind of occurred to me, like, Magneto's not an idiot, but he's not like this Reed Richards kind of character or whatever. And yet he always seemed to be able to build stuff like space stations out of an asteroid, and all these different devices. And it's like, how does he know how to build that? I've always wondered that, and it's never really been explained as far as I'm aware. And this is no different. He's got some kind of device that he claims is going to be the thing that helps him, destroy mankind and take over the world. And he's stealing parts to build whatever this contraption is that he's building. The whole time I'm going, how does he know how to do this? But it was fun because you read these older books, and there's just the way that they're written. I don't know, it's different. This isn't like golden age level writing where it's sometimes very hard to read, but you could tell that they had a lot of fun with it. And this one actually was written, this is after Stan Lee was no longer the writer on it. This one was Roy Thomas. The main creators on this one was Roy Thomas and George Tuska. It was inked by John, name that I have no idea how it's pronounced, so I'm not even going to attempt that one, and lettered by Sam Rosen. But it still feels like what Stan was already doing in a little bit earlier works, and I'm sure that Stan still had a huge hand in this. You can really see the influence coming in. There's certain text box where Stan pipes in and it says something about the X-Men or what's going on here. But they it's still like they didn't take themselves too seriously. They were having these fun stories. It was still early, and they're developing characters. Even at issue 43, you're still seeing some of the things develop. You're seeing with Professor X gone, Scott Summers having to take on the leadership role, and they still call him the deputy leader, even though he's now the guy in charge. It's first announced in this issue that Professor X had been working with Jean Grey on telepathy, because up to this point she had only been telekinetic. And a lot of times we think of Jean Grey actually being telekinesis being a power, but also a telepath, having these mental abilities, mind control, reading people's thoughts, things like that. But it's only just announced in this issue that Professor X had been working with her on that. So she hadn't used those abilities up until this point. So there's kind of this back and forth between Magneto and Quicksilver on, the plan. You can see Quicksilver has not reverted back to being the villain, even though he's joined up with Magneto. He's fighting the X-Men, but he's trying to not hurt them. Kind of pulling his punches and things like that. So it's definitely, you can see that the influence over having been an Avenger and everything, they're still very much there. Some of the conflict between him and Magneto started because Quicksilver had slipped away to Professor X's funeral because he just had this urge to, like, I have to go. This is the one person that I know actually cared about my sister and I. And Magneto was spying on him and saw this and everything else. So they end up on this island where there's this big showdown, and that's about it for this issue. I don't have the next issue. The next issue that I have is a few issues, I think 46 maybe. So it's a couple issues after this takes off. It does have a backup. Comics still were regularly doing their backup stories. In this case, we get Call Him Cyclops, which delves into what are Cyclops' powers. It's not a story, it's just this is his abilities, this is how this works. They go into the visor, they go into the little buttons on his glove, which was a new thing. They had only recently said, because I think readers started to go, wait a minute, how did Cyclops use his visor? He couldn't do the thing where he touches it. His hands were chained up or whatever. And so they say, oh, well, he's got these buttons that, if he carefully places the button on the palm of his hand, he can spin a web or shoot his blast. That's what it was.
Yeah, like a Nintendo Power Glove, if you will.
Yeah. So, they explain to readers how his vision is force blasts, not heat, and things like that. The thing that's really funny is they're talking about how his ruby quartz visor and how it works. And I thought this was funny because they talked about the ruby quartz, and then up in the little corner here you get the little asterisk. They put that as they're talking about something, they'd have the little asterisk, and then there'd be a little text box explaining further on something, so that the readers know. So they do that in this book, and it says, why ruby quartz? We'll let you know as soon as we figure it out ourselves. so yeah, they always had the ruby quartz visor, but even this far along, there was no explanation to why it's ruby quartz other than, hey, we'll call it ruby quartz.
Sounds like Stan Lee wrote that part at least.
So it very well could have been. Like I said, I mean, even though he's not the writer in the story, it still has that feeling to it. There's very much that influence in it. How much of that was because at that point Stan Lee was then an editor, not writing so much, but he was the editor. And I know that editors, particularly at Marvel, DC, early on, even now, they have a lot of say into what's put in those stories. They've got a lot of control on the writing, on the art, what you can get by with and what you can't get by with. They'll make demands on, you need to put this in the story, we need to kill off this character, or we need to use this character more, and they kind of force things in. So I have no idea how much influence Stan Lee really had, but reading it, it feels like that. It feels like early X-Men. It feels like Stan Lee. My only complaint really is I've always hated that version of Angel's costume. It's very like I think Matt Murdock might have designed it. So just it's that ugly yellow, red, blue, just mash up. It's like what Kitty Pryde was doing early on when she couldn't even decide on a name, and she's just like throwing on like silver leggings and stripes and roller skates and all kinds of stuff into it. Same kind of thing there, but yeah, I really enjoyed delving into the really early back issues in the X-Men before it was Uncanny.
Cool. And for the next one, I don't want to throw you off your organization, Kirby, but you are talking about Magneto in this episode.
Yeah.
Are you able to jump into that now?
Yep, that's no problem. All right. I checked out the new Magneto #1. Reason I bought it is because they've been doing these 50th anniversary Howard the Duck covers. And it's supposed to be Howard the Duck as Magneto. Feels a little more Darkwing Duck to me. But I'll accept it as Howard, though. And unlike David, I'm not a fan of the X-Men. I like certain individual characters I'm big on, but I was never big on the whole school, all the different kids and all that. Every time I had high hopes for it, it just wasn't as exciting as I expected it to be when I watched it. But in this one, we have, prior to all this, there was a battle and stuff, and we just got certain young kids that are left from Xavier's Institute, and Magneto came in and basically took care of him, and helped him along the way. We get a little overview of a past battle that they went through and who they battled along the way. I do like some of these new characters. I'm interested in where they're going, and I will read like individual stories that I see come out in the future, but I don't know. I might check out, I think I actually did get some newer X-Men sketch cover thing or something like that, but I will check out some of it. But I do like a lot of the new characters, but yeah, I'm just gonna have to see what happens in the near future, what they come out with. But Magneto came in, basically took care of the crew that's left, helped them out, and is trying to. It's a story we've kind of seen before, with Magneto taking a new light, trying to be this better person, not go on the dark side of that he's so well known for, and with David mentioning all the things he's built over the years, I can see with their past life and everything, I can see Xavier and Magneto being very well read. That's about the only way I can really see him learning all the things he has done over the years. But yeah, every time you see any type of work with him, just forming metal into some new structure, new entity, or new device, it's just flying together. Like he's got to have some knowledge, deep knowledge of something. But here we have our new Magneto character, just being a older gentleman, just keeping it cool. Has all the old school Magneto stuff is all gone. He kind of put that away after the last battles that they went through, and just focusing on making this new group just a better, just keeping them in the right format, just keeping them going along the way. But he gets his own little visit from Ghost of Christmas Past, or whatever you want to say. But Magneto gets a little talking to from some characters that have passed that he had his hand in, from his past experiences when he was highly evil, and they kind of let him know what's going on, put him in, keep his mindset in a certain place. And while he's trying to do all this, all of a sudden he comes back to the kids and finds that something happened. All the kids are laying around the house. The house is destroyed. Nobody's dead, but there are missing a person or persons that end up missing from the group, and he has to figure out what's going on. And when he does, we come across someone that he's got to deal with that just so happens to have his powers, his abilities, and he goes and tries to stop this entity and ends up basically captured, put through things. We find out why they're after him, why they attacked the school, and it's going to take us into more of the story. There's a few other things that happen throughout here that help you understand why Magneto went the way he did, and why he's trying to keep from going back to the way he used to be. I bought this because of the Howard cover. I did not pre-order 2 and 3. I do want to see where this goes, so I probably will maybe go 6 issues with this at least, and see what happens. I'll have to stop at a comic shop and pick up the issues I'm missing on. But yeah, I always liked the Magneto character and his ability and what he could do, and just you never really focused on how he was able to do all the stuff he was able to and construct what he could. But yeah, it always amazed me with that ability. I mean, he could be like the most powerful thing out there in my mind, just being able to use that ability. But yeah, I did like this. If you've never read X-Men before, this would be an easy one to jump into and get you started on a fresh new world of X-Men, because you're not dealing with any past characters really. I mean, a few of them are part of what's happening, but the little bit you need to know about them, you probably already know from all the Marvel movies and everything else that are out there. But yeah, this would be a great jumping on point if you want to focus on a whole new X-Men. I mean, they're coming out with a lot of stuff right now with X-Men, so this will be leading all into that whole world. So that would be great to do. And this is done. I just had them done by J.M. DeMatteis, Todd Nowak, Rachel Rosenberg, and VC's Travis Lanham. But yeah, I definitely, if you want to get into the X-Men world, this would be a great start. And I think I would personally say probably the funner start to get you going into it. But you can also get the full version.
Yeah, a question for you. Just from what you showed of the art flipping over, does this all take place in one time, like new, or is this going back to a certain point in his history? Because from what you showed, it looked like when he took over leadership of the X-Men and specifically of the New Mutants, which would have been mid late 80s when they were introduced. And that's kind of the costume with the big M. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that actually looks like New Mutants. So I'm just wondering if this is actually going back and doing some sort of retcon to his history from that period rather than taking place right now. And I don't know, because I have not kept up on anything with the X-Men ever since Hickman destroyed them for me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's taking place in that world, kind of like what they've been doing with the Silver Surfer. It was like, hey, let's take it back to that 90s era of comics and tell an untold story. That's what it sounds like.
Right. It's basically we're in the present time right now, but he does these flashbacks where you're going to that New Mutant era where, like you said, with the big M on his outfit and stuff. So yeah, those are just flashback parts from it that they're doing, but just to give you the history of what happened to all the school and everything in the past with Charles and why he got to where he is now.
Okay. And yeah, just because I know, like, Magneto's been up and down, back and forth between being one of the good guys and being one of the bad guys. As an example, the story that I was reading and reviewing here, this was still very much, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, where Magneto was not like, hey, I respect Professor X and whatever, but I disagree with him. It was, no, humanity must die. And my only regret is that Professor X's death wasn't by my own hand and all this stuff. Whereas more currently, Magneto actually would have been saddened by the death of Professor X, because even though they didn't see eye to eye, there was a mutual respect. Yes, they were sometimes forced to attack each other even in a way where they felt the other might perish or whatever. But the characters had changed. So rather than being black and white, it really became a lot more gray areas in a lot of these characters. But there have been times. Initially, it was when Magneto took over the school and became the leader over the New Mutants, you know, and then there was the trial of Magneto and things like that. And then he'd been back to the side of bad, and then he'd be back to the side of good, and teaming up. So yeah, I just wasn't sure, because I think he has again been a teacher at the school and stuff like that over time. So yeah, it's always this. Yeah, well, it's a soap opera. Comic books are soap operas, you know.
Yeah, and it takes you back to the period where he was like trying to destroy all the militaries and all that. And so you get your different versions of Magneto in here when you're going with the past history and stuff. So yeah, it bounces all over the place.
Okay, so it's a modern current thing, but there are these flashbacks to tell the reader, you know, give the history
Yep.
and show the reader who this person is. So.
Yeah, that's why I think it's perfect for someone that's new that wants to jump on, because it's going to give you, I mean, this one alone probably took you through about 3-4 periods of Magneto's history. So, and then you also have the ghosts that come and see him, that he basically had his hand in causing whatever happened to them. So
All right. Cool. All right. Jumping over to my next one here. A couple weeks back, I talked about meeting Guy Gilchrist, who is an awesome cartoonist, Jim Henson's cartoonist. And what I'm here to talk about is tracking down his Muppet newspaper comic strips that he did from 1981 to 1986, because I found them in cute little digest form. So these are the original
Yay.
printings from the 80s. We are talking about Muppets on the Town. We are talking about Muppets Light on Our Feet. We're talking about Muppets Froggy Mountain Breakdown. And we're talking Muppets Chickens Are People Too. And
What are
Muppets
gonzos?
Short, Green, and Handsome. So there we go. The Guy Gilchrist and his son Brad Gilchrist were the creators on these comics. And so yeah, these editions, there's 5 volumes. I think there's like a long out of print, like bigger volume. There are a few repeated panels, because I read these all almost like just back to back to back to back, and there was a couple of them that were reprinted in a later volume. So I have a suspicion that this isn't everything that was ever published. I think this is everything that they ever released in a collected format. Meaning, if Disney and Marvel Publishing and everybody's listening, I would 100% buy a giant omnibus of everything. So yeah, this is just me kind of just an overview of talking about what these Muppets comic strips were like. These editions are all done in black and white, newspaper style comics, and you've got, you know, it's just one story per page for the most part. There are some ongoing themes that you would notice, that maybe he was on a kick for a certain joke for an entire week, that the next day's, you know, comic strip kind of continued a little bit. But for the most part, they're all just like 1 to 3 panel joke setups, and it's a lot of the kind of humor and style that you would get from that original Muppet show. So you can definitely see that that's where the inspiration was from. That's what it kind of really leaned into. So you saw, you know, they would revisit the pigs in space idea several times. You would see the veterinarian's hospital with Dr. Bob. You know, Rolf was playing Dr. Bob, and you would see. You know, all of these same kind of like skits that you would get from the Muppet Show are basically done in brand new comic strip format. You would get definitely a lot of Statler and Waldorf related ones, and you would definitely, I don't know if they just organized it like that in the collection, but once you kind of grabbed on like Statler and Waldorf, you would just have pages of that and stuff. But I got a feeling it's something where they probably just kind of collected the themes together a little more. But yeah, it's you know, Kermit's nephew Robin is showcased quite a bit throughout this. There's a little example of the Dr. Bob stuff going on. It's just so much fun, and all of the joke setups you would imagine. So there are five volumes out there. They were relatively inexpensive. I had to kind of go between eBay and Amazon sellers. So anywhere from like $5 to $10. I think maybe one of them was like 15 with 20 with shipping. Must have been, more, hard to find one, but they're all beaten and loved and read and everything like that. But yeah, they're all intact and everything. And then just because we have some fun Guy Gilchrist art on the back, for our video audience, subscribe to Crimson Cowl Comic Club on YouTube if you're listening on iTunes, so you can see some of these show and tell examples here. But yep, all of the characters. Although I don't think Sweetums was in here anywhere. So yeah, I'm gonna have to write a letter to the editor on this one and see if we can retroactively get more Sweetums. But we do have some of the bigger monsters. I know that like big blue guy. I don't know what his name is offhand, but yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think we've seen Sweetums in here. But anyways, this is a great collection of comics. Even if you found one of these digests out in the wild, it's definitely a fun time and well worth your money. If you love the Muppets, definitely check out the newspaper comic strips. Now, I was never a huge like Muppets comic fan. I've got a couple things here and there, but it's one of those things like I was with Star Wars, where I was just mostly like, I just enjoyed movie Star Wars, and for so long I never really, yeah, I was kind of bored with some of the old Star Wars comics. But then when they did the 2015, Marvel acquired and all that kind of stuff, like they were just like knocking it out of the park. And then I would go back and revisit some of those things just because my brain wasn't open to being like, well, I watch Star Wars in the movies. Like I don't read them in the books or the novels or anything like that. Katie obviously has done several deep dives and had lots of praise over that stuff. It's just my personal thing where I'm just like, oh, I
Yeah.
always just did them as movies. And
Yeah,
whenever
that's
I
reasonable.
would check out Muppets comics, and anytime I would see their legs, I was always freaked out. We see
yeah.
the legs a couple times in the movies, very small scenes. There's a Kermit tap dancing scene here and there. They're riding the bikes and things, but for the most part, they don't show a lot of their full bodies. So when you would see them in comic books, you would see that a lot more often. They wouldn't really stage the art as if they're behind a set, for the most part. But yeah, that's just me having to get over that from time to time. And those comics right there is a great example of awesome, awesome Muppet comic work. So yeah, that was from Guy and Brad Gilchrist. Those are all just old volumes from the 80s. You can go out there and seek them out if I didn't buy the last 5 copies of the 5 volumes that are out there. But yep, they're well worth it if you stumble across them. So that
Nice.
was
Those look so cool. Thank you for bringing those.
yeah, and just those digest forms, I know I picked some up at the Crimson Cowl Rummage sales when I would get the Beetle Bailey ones, and there's a bunch of different, those digest forms. And anytime I come across those, I got some Heathcliff ones and stuff. I'm trying to think where the heck I found those, but I got some of those on my pile here. Maybe I got them from Crimson, but yeah, anytime
There
I
might
come
have been a few of
across
those in there too.
yeah. So anytime I come across these little like old newspaper digest forms of these strips, I think I'm going to pick them up because they're just awesome condensed reads. All right, that's going to do it for the Muppets from Guy and Brad Gilchrist. Kirby, what you got?
I just rewatched the original Muppet movie a couple nights ago.
Nice.
Still holds up wonderfully. It's been a while since I watched it.
It's good.
One of the first films I got to see live when I was younger. All right. We got Impact Winter, Rook. This is by Travis Beacham, Andrea Milana, Valentina Taddeo. This is your vampiric story that we've heard a million times. It's done a variety of different ways, where you have your character that's just getting their back history, just a warrior going through life and comes across a maiden that's tied up, about to be tortured. And back in those days, and this goes back to like, I want to say a couple hundred, well, actually more like, I think like 48 AD. And we have some characters dressed up, looks like they're doing some type of strange ritual with this gal. So our warrior comes in and instantly goes to save the girl. Why find out what the reason is, why she's tied up, why she's got these weird chains on her and all this stuff, these weird symbols put on her body, and it's like they're trying to stop him. It's like, no, you don't understand. This is a very evil entity, and we're trying to banish it from the planet. And he just doesn't care. He's gonna save the girl, goes through, wipes them out, and does what he has to. And she's trying to get back to her home, and he vows that I will get you home. I will protect you all the way there. And she explains to him that she's got this little sensitivity to light. So while she sleeps during the day, he sits outside whatever building she's in and just makes sure she's protected. And then they keep traveling every night. And you have these moments where they spend a night with a lady, and they go to leave, and after she's very drained down and wore out, and he accepts it that she's just refreshed from a good night's sleep and stuff, but the person that they spent the night with isn't there to see him off as they leave. And she just says that they were tired and went to bed, and then they go on, but yet she's revitalized and has all kinds of extra strength and good to go for the travels now. We get a little history of her I hate to call it master, but creator, the person that turned her originally. He was this evil being that basically preyed on young innocent characters and decided to keep her, basically turn her. And he was the one that gave her her original vampiric form. And she eventually did what she had to with them and went on her own. And I don't want to give all that away because that's going to lead up to stuff in the future for people that want to read this. But I read the original volume of Impact Winter. It was a wonderful story. I really liked where that went. It led into volume 2. And they've had, I think this is the second one shot that they put out that I've got so far. And I really like the way they're doing these to introduce characters and going way back into history to find out more about them. I really enjoyed this Rook character that we have, and the cover gives his image better. But eventually something happens where, of course, he's on his deathbed, and she gives him the opportunity to let her turn him, and that's how he gets his vampiric transformation. But she explains to him that she's been trying to go deeper back into the past, find out who turned the vampire that turned her and who turned the one before him, and goes on and on, where we end up finding so far that it's basically a female vampire from way back in history. And she found one of the first persons the first person that figure turned, and he had some information that led her to going back to where she lived, because there's a cave that has some possible artifacts or information stuff to help her figure out more about this entity and possibly a way to take this entity out. So that's why she worked her way back there. And because of that, she's gonna run into things from her past, and there's townsfolks that know of her past history to an extent, and they find out that she's back and they want to stop that also, so they have to deal with all that. And when she does get back to her homeland, it's been quite a few years, but there's not much left other than rubble and a few crumbled buildings and stuff. So there it starts us into what's going to lead into volume 2, I believe, of the Impact Winter run. But I don't have Audible. I do want to get into it, but they do have Impact Winter audio stories that also lead into more things. I think there's going to be a movie or a series that this is going to lead into also, which I'm really looking forward to because I love how this history and lore goes. You also get a little sketchbook in the back, which is always nice to have those bonuses. You also get a little back history of where we were, where we're going, and stuff with the whole Impact Winter storyline. But yeah, this was a really enjoyable one shot to get us caught up. It's like I completely forgot what was up with this storyline and stuff, and when I read this one shot, it kind of brought me back, and I'm like, yeah, I am definitely looking forward to where this is going to go and what volume 2 is going to take us into. But yeah, check out Impact Winter. I think there's a couple one shots. You got the Audible stories, you got the volumes out there. So lots of good contact for people that are into the vampiric storylines.
And if you want some more vampire Audible collections, released at the time of this recording is the Slayers, a Buffyverse Audible original that is done by Amber Benson and Christopher Golden. Amber Benson, it was Tara on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and they brought back all of the original voices for the characters of Cordelia and Anya and Drusilla, Spike, Clem, all of these people, and it was just released leading into this weekend. I've listened to one episode so far, but I'm going to go through. There's 8 of them total for 9 hours of story on Audible Original, and I will be coming to the club with that in a future episode. So it's a good time if you want vampires and Audible stuff. There's a lot for you there between the Impact Winter and Buffy.
Cool.
Cool. All right. The last one of the weekly reviews here is something that I held off on for a while because I didn't want this series to end. I got the book, beginning of September, and I was rereading the other 2. But then I just kind of, savored it a little bit because I knew that once I read this 3rd book, then the trilogy is complete. So back in 2018, I talked about Sheets from Brenna Thumler. And then throughout the years, we've had several people talk about it, whether it's myself and Kirby and Katie. We've all, picked up Sheets over the years. And then we also talked about Sheets being the hardcover edition, which included not only the original graphic novel, as well as the free comic book day story. And then the sequel to Sheets, we talked about Delicates, and that was out there. It came out, within that time. And then now, from the creator of the best-selling Sheets, a Barnes & Noble best-selling book of 2018, Barnes & Noble Best Book of 2018. This is Lights from Brenna Thumler. Following the events of Sheets and Delicates, Lights brings Brenna Thumler's characters, artwork, and ghostly charm back to life. Speaking of ghostly charm, I keep these little ghost literal charms in front of me that were hand-created by Brenna Thumler. Marjorie Glatt's life was forever changed the day she discovered a group of ghosts hiding in her family's laundromat. One of the ghosts was Wendell, a lonely phantom turned Marjorie's best friend. When he and Marjorie are joined by the ghost enthusiast Eliza Duncan, the 3 friends band together in friendship, bravery, and all things paranormal. That is the end of that synopsis there. So, Sheets, we met Marjorie. Her mother had passed away tragically. she was left as like a late middle schooler. I don't even think, yeah, she wasn't even in high school then, to basically run the family laundromat in the first volume of Sheets. Her dad dealing with the depression of losing his wife. There's a younger brother to Marjorie in that story, but it was left up to Marjorie basically to run the family. And during that time, we saw the Land of Ghost, and we met Wendell the Ghost. Not only did we meet Wendell the Ghost in Sheets, but there's a ongoing theory that we met Wendell the Ghost in the old Crimson Cowl Comic Club storefront in one of the episodes. I have to do some extensive research and find where that clip is somewhere. But yeah, there was our own little ghost mystery that started after I talked about this book for the very first time. Um, and throughout that story, we saw Marjorie dealing not only with the tragedy of the home life and running a family business, but also juggling school and popularity and the lack thereof. And that first book dealt with her meeting Wendell the Ghost and him coming from a tragic past in itself, and how their friendship grew from that connection. And without going into further details of that, we do meet a new character, Eliza Duncan, in the Delicates graphic novel. And it continues the story as Marjorie is actually slowly getting into some popularity. She finds a group of friends that maybe aren't so necessarily friendly to others. And Marjorie is dealing with the balance of, finding a place where she can kind of, be happy and have friendships. But also it's definitely a big concern because that new friend group is not so nice to her other new friend, Eliza Duncan. Eliza Duncan is the daughter of one of the school teachers, and I think he's the swim coach. And so the second book deals with Eliza having her interest in ghosts and photography, and she's just dealing with herself being an extreme loner and dealing with her own depression and everything. All of these characters that are brought in to these books, it is very much rooted in depression, and you see many different facets with these characters and how they interact with each other. Without going into details of how that book goes, I am here to talk about Lights. This is the third and final volume of the Sheets trilogy. And like I said, I kind of waited to start this one because I knew that once I started it, I was just going to keep going through it, and eventually it was going to end. I will, this is a non spoiler review for those who haven't read Lights or even the other books. Completely satisfied with what we got in this wrap up. With this book, we start to see Marjorie kind of going away from that friend group that she had in the second book, realizing that, ultimately they were bullies, and that her real friendship lies with Eliza, who shares on the cover here. And it really sees their friendship build, as well as Wendell. They all have this secret that the fact that Wendell is an actual ghost that exists. So they still keep that, hidden from everybody, whether it's family members and people at school and stuff like that. But this book deals with, once again, another facet of depression, dealing with the reason and the cause of Wendell's death. We had gotten little teases of it throughout this series, but Lights deals with that mystery. I am definitely not talking about that mystery. I'm only just going to talk about, experiencing that throughout, Brenna's storytelling and her art. So Marjorie and Eliza are going through this book, trying to figure out, how did Wendell die? We know through newspaper search, online research, that Wendell had drowned tragically as a young boy. I don't know if he maybe in that 10 to 12-year-old range, if I'm going to guess. And for the first, we had a little glimpse of that in one of the books, but in this book, it is littered with flashbacks of young Wendell as a human. And we see him with his passion of dance and performing and theater, and we see his family life. So I'll just show a couple glimpses of young Wendell there. Let me just see once, yep, right up in the, that's what I want to show off there. Him dancing in his room there. He's got his a cute animal hat that he's wearing. And what's really cool is it's very very easy to find these flashbacks because they are all have that kind of color scheme to it, and we dip into the pinks. So when you go through this book, we know we're jumping into flashback mode, and I thought it was very well structured of kind of getting this mystery as our present time characters are all trying to solve that. And Wendell overall as a ghost doesn't have much memory, but there's little things that spark his memory as they search the town, and they found the house that he grew up in. And as he goes through that and goes through the theater, and there's all of these places that are eventually seen through the flashbacks, is when he starts getting little pieces of his memory back, but still not knowing the cause of his death beyond drowning. But there is a mystery lying in there that it maybe wasn't necessarily a drowning, much more it being a murder. And that is the ultimate setup for what this book is. Once again, testing the friendships of Marjorie and Eliza, because we do have some people from that popular friend group who have also detached themselves from the other toxic friends in that group, but are not by Marjorie's choice, but by her dad's choice, thinking like, hey, these are your friends, right? Hey, how about they come over for your birthday party? Yeah, come over, blah, blah, blah. And Marjorie's like, Dad, like, these are not my friends. And now she's forced to literally have these two bullies in her house. And you see how that affects Eliza, not really understanding, thinking that, well, you're still with this friend group who actively bullies me. And it is just an interesting dynamic as you see these characters just constantly clashing. It's just back and forth, and very drama filled. And while ultimately, Wendell's, feeling left out from Marjorie, but has a connection with Eliza. And that's what's really cool about that, is that the friendship that you saw in book one with Marjorie and Wendell, you see a lot of that actually in book three with Eliza and Wendell. And you kind of see how they feel excluded from Marjorie as she's kind of trying to find, her true self as well. But these are three awesome books. They're recommended for, I think they say, like ages 9 and up, like middle grade. They're listed as a paranormal book. Um, these are books that I'm going to keep buying time and time again for every collection. I bought that hardcover version. I believe the hardcover version of Delicates is coming out next year. A year from then, we'll hopefully get the hardcover version of Lights. This is a book I'll never stop buying and never stop reading. I've read the first two books several times, and especially with the anticipation of the new one coming out. But now that they're all completed, I'm just going to have to find time to consistently reread these time and time again, and then share them, buy them, give them as gifts, because I think these are awesome, awesome reads. There we go. There's a better image of that. So Brenna Thumler did an awesome job with these graphic novels. She had done some work prior to this with being the illustrator for the Anne of Green Gables graphic novel adaptation, which I talked about on this very show a while back. But this was her first venture into the comic book world as a solo creator, and she's got other things that she's been teasing for 2024, and she's just one of those creators that I'm constantly going to follow for everything that she comes up with. So awesome conclusion to the Sheets trilogy. I'm sad that it's over, but like I said, it's very satisfying as a story altogether. And to commemorate reading those books, especially one right after the other for this one here, I had to draw Marjorie and Wendell. Right there we go. Drew them sharing a nice little hug there as I kind of cope with the fact that at this point, these characters' stories have been told. 10 years down the road, I hope to see some more of this, just because, hey, we're bringing it back. But right now, it's done. She's going to move on to some other awesome things. So yeah, awesome work from Brenna Thumler for Sheets, Delicates, and the brand new graphic novel, Lights. All right, I think I said everything I needed to out of that. That is going to do it for the weekly reviews. We do have one more segment, and that is the news.
And now the news.
All right, welcome to the previews preview. This is part 1 of 2. On our next episode, we will cover the independent catalog with the independent publishers and the merchandise and the apparel and the collectibles. But this week we are going to cover Marvel and DC October 2023 previews catalogs, talking about what we are excited for. Off air, we talked about we actually didn't have too many new things to talk about, but I will advertise a collection of our club pick, because Marvel Unleashed, a trade paperback, is scheduled to come out in February. We're about to talk about issue 2 in a future episode. We talked about issue 1 not too long ago, but if you did enjoy that and it's something that you didn't pick up, the 4-issue miniseries is going to be collected this February for a retail price of $18 for 112 pages, and there may be discounts based on whoever you pick up this pre-orders from. But I just want to give a shout out to a club pick that we all seem to enjoy: Marvel Unleashed trade paperback this February. Kirby?
As I showed earlier in the episode, I love the Howard the Duck covers. I hate when they do it in the middle of a run and not do it just the issue number 1, but they have Immortal Thor number 5 with a Dustin Guion Howard the Duck cover. It's awesome looking. It's got Howard trying to lift the hammer and Thor just sitting there looking over his shoulders, just kind of like, yeah, that's not going to happen, buddy. But yeah, I definitely got to get that cover, even though I haven't read the first 4 issues.
That's issue 5, you said?
Yep.
Because I have waiting on my review stack. I didn't read 1, 2, and 3, but I picked up 4 because Man-Thing is on the cover, but he is in the
Cool.
story. It's not a Man-Thing cover. And I think he's in issue 4 and 5 because I think it's a condensed, whatever, its own story. So just FYI, I read number 4, didn't need 1 through 3, and I'll be picking up number 5 as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get number 4 now too. That you showed me that.
Yep, I read it without needing 1, 2, and 3, and it was definitely good. So I mean, it might be worth
But that was Immortal Thor.
Oh, I thought you said. I thought you said Hulk.
Okay, because I'm like, they got Hulk on the cover.
Oh, okay, then erase everything I just said. I thought you
Bonus
said.
review.
I'm thinking of whatever the last. What was the subtitle for the last Hulk? My brain was thinking that because I think it was wasn't it something like that?
Yeah, it was Immortal Hulk.
Yeah.
So yeah, my brain thought that. So everything I just said doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Although it is, I will be talking.
Glad you showed that because I want that cover. So.
And I was thinking,
That's a
I'm
good
like, well,
cover.
if I have issue 4 and you're talking about issue 5 for December, I'm like, oh, maybe they're taking a month or 2 off. But okay, that makes way more sense. So yeah, pick up Thor and pick up Hulk. I'll talk about Hulk in a future episode. All right, I'm not going to edit that out. All right, Katie, Marvel.
Sure. So Marvel Meow number 1. This looks like it started as a digital exclusive, now moved to print. It is about Captain Marvel's cat, Chewie, just being a little kitty cat and wreaking havoc throughout the Marvel universe, being a complete goofball. I'm hoping this will be in the vein of like the It's Jeff and the Pet Avengers and the Lockjaw comics that are so much fun and super cute. So I'm interested to check that out. That's Marvel Meow number 1. It's in shops January 3rd and it's selling for $5.99. Speaking of which, I noticed Marvel appears to have raised the prices on their single issues up to $5.99. Is that correct? Or is this like a double size?
So I must have missed that somewhere because I definitely would have talked about it. With it being so, we're at the time of the year where the catalogs and the pre-orders get weird.
Oh, sure.
Because they get ahead of time with the holidays, so we get a couple of January things in there. But so I'm wondering if the physical catalog doesn't have it, but the online catalogs may have it, depending.
That's probably exactly it.
That is, I mentioned earlier before the show that I was putting it in my list, but they had no description online where I looked and no picture. But I'm glad Katie explained it, because now I definitely will put it on my list. I was just going to wait to see if the next catalog showed it and gave more of a description.
Yeah, no problem. I noticed that with a bunch of the Marvel books, so I had to go out and Google them, and that's how come I found out, oh, this existed on the Marvel
Unlimited.
Unlimited. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
About
with that,
about 3 months ago, Marvel started doubling up on stuff and showing stuff that would be like in the
Yep.
fall catalog, and they just won't give a description or nothing. So
Mhm.
I think that's why we're starting to see that happen.
all of the early solicits, and then talking about the price point now, a lot of their starter issues have been $4.99, but they have been
Okay.
extra. They gave you the appropriate amount of extra pages for that initial $5 debut issue. With Marvel Meow, with it being a Marvel Unlimited, like the Jeff thing, I'm guessing it's an oversized type of thing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I'm trying to think if I read that or not, or if that was out during my period with Marvel Unlimited. But yeah, I'll definitely be getting that too. But yeah, for those wondering, it's probably going to be in the next printed catalog. But it looks like it is out there for pre-orders online and
Mhm.
stuff. So
Yeah, I'll be getting it. So if you want to make it a club pick down the road, that's no problem.
it'll most likely be exactly that, because we've got a theme with all of these Marvel Animal Club picks recently. So. All right, back over to me. I didn't have anything else to highlight other than in this print catalog, they're always promoting the evergreen graphic novels, things that are just pretty much always in print and always accessible, classic stories from Marvel history. Whether we're talking about, I had the page, but then here it is. Whether it's the Infinity Gauntlet and things like Civil War, the original, Miles Morales Spider-Man Volume 1, Old Man Logan, Daredevil Born Again, Secret Wars, all of these things. Yeah, there's the Immortal Hulk. So that's where my brain went off on that. All of these Dark Phoenix Saga, but the one I wanted to highlight, someone who I'm wearing on my shirt, because tickets are available for The Marvels as in the next big MCU movie. And I was happy to see that out of all of those big classic Marvel storylines over the decades, that they included the volume 1 of the Normal Again for Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel. So I was excited to see that she was included alongside Miles for these younger heroes, with them being evergreen graphic novels. So given a promotion for that, to check it out, because we're going to see her on the big screen for the first time. If you didn't have Disney Plus, we saw her television show in 6 episodes, but she'll be Aman Vellani will be very bright. You'll see how fun that actress is in the role of Kamala Khan. So check out the comics first. Kirby, is that everything?
That's it. The rest of mine are like Cap Wolf, Howling Commandos, Marvel Zombies, Black, White, and Blood, and Silver Surfer Rebirth.
All
Continue.
the ongoings.
Yep.
All right, and then anything for you, Katie, yet from Marvel?
Sure. So we have Star Wars Revelations. Now, there was a Revelations issue last year, so I'm like, well, is this a reprint? But based off the description, I don't think so. So maybe this is going to be like an annual wrap-up type thing for all the many series. I'm interested in it because Thrawn and Keeve Trennis are on the cover, and I really like those characters quite a bit. Keeve is from the Star Wars The High Republic comics, the first run. Thrawn is originally an EU character who has now been brought back into the current canon, had a big moment in Ahsoka. And I actually enjoyed the last one. I thought it was pretty good. So I would give this a shot. That is Star Wars Revelations 2023 for $6.99. And one more, there is another Star Wars Epic Collection coming out. It's a volume 4 in The Menace Revealed. So I wouldn't say that's a must read, but if you're like me and you really enjoy collecting the Epic collections, go ahead and get your pre-orders in for that right now.
Get them now before they're extremely expensive in the aftermarket. As we heard about your journeys trying to find these things. And all right, and that'll do it for Marvel. There's tons of stuff in the catalog, but those are just a couple of our highlights. We'll jump over to DC Comics. Almost the same thing for me. Don't have much to share, but I'm always buying Jenny Frison covers, and I was already getting the series anyways. But Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Red are number 6, which I'm going to guess is probably, it's the final of the mini series for this. But the Jenny Frison cover is the main cover, I believe, and I would get this regardless if I was buying the series or not. But just an awesome. She draws Harley Quinn great. I've got so many of the covers, and this will just be yet another one. So that'll be the wrap up of Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Redder. I've read one of them so far. I got the others to read yet, but yeah, fun series. So, Kirby,
Yeah, I love the way that cover looks, and that's the one I chose to pick too. Also, my thing I was going to talk about is Peacemaker Tries Hard. They got the hardcover collection out now by Kyle Starks and Steve Pooh. If you didn't hear our reviews or anything, I reviewed the first issue and fell in love with it. Decided I was just going to wait for the trade to come out. But having earned his release from the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker wants to try to do normal superhero stuff for a change. Unfortunately, everyone, including the bad guys, thinks he sucks at superhero stuff. But when busting up a terrorist ring introduces Christopher Smith to the cutest puppy to ever walk, awkwardly, on four legs, he finds the unconditional love he's been denied his whole life, until the dog is kidnapped by a supervillain with some very unsuperheroic plans for Peacemaker's brand of ultraviolence. Will he help an unstable criminal steal the world's most valuable and dangerous DNA? Honestly, Christopher's pretty lonely, so it probably just depends on how nicely they ask. But yeah, I just love it, and because the dog's got the little tuxedo type thing, he gets that little Bruce Wayne name, and it's awesome.
Yep. Kirby talked praise of that comic, and then we had comic creator Winston Gambro on, and that was his comic of choice to join us in the club. And I had read issue 1. I was in that same boat as Kirby, where I'm like, well, I loved it so much that, yep, 100% getting that collection. And yeah, I'm excited to read it as a whole. If you're a fan of the James Gunn and John Cena take on the character from the Suicide Squad movie, and then furthermore, with the TV show that's on Max, you're gonna love this comic. It's in that same vein. And James Gunn, it was cool because he just gave a shout out to the comic as well, as he's in charge of the new direction for the upcoming DC universe for the movies and television and animation and all that kind of stuff and video games. I believe he's watching over that. It's cool. He's always been a comic fan, and it was just awesome to see on one of his posts of him shouting out, this book, and just being, you don't see that a lot of the big Hollywood people being like, hey, get this book, everybody. Cool. Anything from DC for you, Katie?
Sure, I have just one. It is Teen Titans Go to the Library, written by the famous cartoonists Art Balthazar and Franco. They're doing the art, the writing, with assistance from Agnes Garbowska. It's going to be $10, and it's 160 pages, and it is on sale the beginning of January if everything goes right with the holidays. I saw this because Art and Franco are friends of our show and of our sister podcast, Cartoonist by Night. And I'm like, you know what? We're always shouting them out and talking about them. I'd read that. That looks fun. So, Teen Titans Go to the Library. Check it out. And that's all for DC.
They definitely know their things when it comes to the characters of the Titans, with having the Tiny Titans for a long run on that led them into their big DC, success and all that stuff. So yeah, that is an original graphic novel coming out. That's going to be super fun. Can't wait to check that one out.
Yeah, and in 2024, we're going to see Art's hand put into Dr. Seuss, and I can't wait for that.
Yeah, that was a big announcement he had. He's been, you can pre-order it now through a bunch of different retailers, and I highly suggest that, even though I didn't look to see if it's in the new catalog yet, if it's that, because it seems like it's pretty fresh news.
We got 6 months till it comes out. So.
Okay. Because it's one of those things that I'm going to get it through other retailers just again and get those numbers out there, being like, yep, I got to make sure to get that pre-order out there, because yeah, he gets to play in the world of Dr. Seuss, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Cool. I didn't have anything left for DC. Kirby?
I'm all good.
So yeah, that is going to do it. There's a lot more things in those catalogs. Those are just a couple of things we highlighted. We had an awesome, excellent extra sized. That's when you know we've done too much, or I can't get the words correct. We had an extra sized episode. We exercised our ability to talk about comics with an extra sized episode. How about that? So that's going to do it. Yeah. On our next upcoming episodes, talking about those club discussions, more previews for the October catalogs, and yeah, just to jump into plugs real quick, crimsoncowl.com for info and original webcomics. Crimson Cowl Comic Club on YouTube. If you are just listening to the iTunes version, you're only watching half of the show. Something like Comedy Bang Bangs. Like if you're only doing this, you're only getting half the story. Jump over to the YouTube version to see some of the show and tell and see our smiling faces and our background. Sometimes there's animals that pop up here and there. A lot of fun stuff over on the YouTube. So hit subscribe and like and review and comment and all that fun stuff. Also on this YouTube channel, just recently dropped is a 3-hour Mighty Con recap special. Myself and David talked about the experience of being under the Crimson Cowl Media banner at the Milwaukee Mighty Con in September 2023, and more specifically for David and I, showcasing our art for the first time at a convention. We brought Kirby onto the show to talk about the convention floor and his experience with what it was like and the vibe of the show floor for MightyCon. And then we brought on some of the artist friends we've met over the years, and I talked about their art on this very show. We had Yasmin and Darian from Forged in Gold, and Yasmin gave a very special sneak peek at something that we've mentioned on this show several times about some art that we've purchased from her, and there's kind of a revamp, a rework of something much beloved, and I don't want to give it away here. Got to go check out that special on YouTube because she gave us the first look at that, and it was super cool. And then we had Greg Schmidt from Schmidt and Giggle. He joined us as well as Amy Raguti, who is also known as Space Throb. All of them joined us. It was so excited. I was so excited to have them on, and they were so excited to be on, and yeah, it was an awesome. It's a 3-hour conversation, but I think there's a lot of good stuff coming out of that one. So definitely check that one out. It's a YouTube only, just due to length and size file wouldn't last long on the iTunes feed. So check that out on YouTube. The Crimson Cowl, all one word on Instagram, Crimson Cowl Comic Club on iTunes, Crimson Cowl Comic Club at yahoo.com to email us. Kirby has a spin-off podcast Under the Cowl of MS. Kind of let our people know what's going on over at Under the Cowl of MS.
We're a little behind right now, but we're getting caught up. But you can find comic book reviews, previews, shop and con information, unpackings, toy openings, critter videos, wrestling, video games, comic book readings, MS, dementia stuff, NFL, NHL, MMA, art videos, all kinds of stuff, whatever I feel like putting out there. So there's something for just about everybody.
Basically, if it exists on planet Earth or beyond, you're talking about it on the show there. So
yeah, and if I don't talk about it, you want me to talk about it, I'll do it. I just did an AI interview for the first time with the creator, so you can catch that also.
Cool. So subscribe to Under the Cowl of MS wherever you get your audio podcast, as well as YouTube. I have art accounts on Facebook and Instagram, Anthony Laatsch, Laatsch. I'm also a co-host, co-creator on Cartoonist by Night, a drawing show on YouTube with Troy Dungera, Matt Fife, and Matt Rogers. And we just dropped a new episode of Dynamic Duo with myself and Matt Rogers, as we get to talk and draw about anything. I draw some Man-Thing. He's drawing some Abraham Linkage and more. We're talking about some Halloween stuff. We field a couple questions we got from Instagram. And then during this show, I got a confirmation of our first big creator artist guest that we're going to start recording on Thursday for a future release. All I'll tease is that we may have mentioned that person's name in this very episode in this last segment that we talked about. So that's all I want to say, but it was pretty exciting. This person demanded to be on the show when we announced it. So we are now moving into our guest realm of Cartoonist by Night. So subscribe to Cartoonist by Night on YouTube. And there's like 10 or 12 videos up there now to check out. That is going to do it for this awesome episode. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for listening and watching. Subscribe, tell a friend, all of that fun stuff. We'll be back for more in future episodes, but that's going to do it for this one. This whole time, I've been hungry for some Piggy Mac.
I've been making strange science in winter with Magneto.
And I've been having a tea party with God.
To be continued.
Thank you, Slimer.